in one moment. So just so people know, welcome everybody. We're learning now 88 Peichet in the first chapter of Kuzari. Baruch Habai. We started just a quick introduction because it's been a while. I'll tell you a story. I just did basic training. I just went back to Tironut, and the first week I was ready to give up. And I told my son, who's in Aza, he's in a commando unit in Aza. I said, "Listen, I can't keep going. It's too hard." So what did he do? He sent out my number to all of his friends that are in Aza, all of his unit, and said, "Send my father messages, telling him that he can do it." The next day, I was on fire, and Baruch Hashem, I made it through Tironut. So I just threw that out, but let's get back to where we are. We're learning Kuzari, and the Kuzari is a discussion between a non-Jewish king and a rabbi. And the story happened 1,400 years ago. So just to put you back into where we are, we'll go back a little bit. The king asks the rabbi, he's becoming more convinced, he's becoming more aware of the concepts and the ideas of Judaism. And by the way, at the end of the first chapter, he converts. So chapter 2, it's already a Jew talking to a Jew, and he's learning more about who he is. In the first chapter, so the king asks, welcome everybody. We're learning Kuzari. So the king asks the rabbi, how did your religion become a religion? Did it happen gradually? Did it happen gradually by a very charismatic person? Tell me how it was developed. Did you have a charismatic person who came up with an idea and then gathered people around him, and then it changed like this, and then it changed like that, and then solidified and became the religion that it is today? Because here we're talking 1,500 years after Avram Avinu. So tell me how it happened. How did your religion was founded? Because we know there's two ways that religions are founded: either by a charismatic individual, like we have Muhammad and we have Jesus, or did it happen by a king, a government, who made laws, and everyone had to keep the laws, and if you don't keep it, we kill you? How did it happen? Was it a government, or was it an individual? And the king and the rabbi says to the king, you're completely not understanding what Judaism is about. The way that the Jewish religion was founded was the way the world was created. The way the world was created, there was nothing, and now there is something. Suddenly the world was created. God said, let there be, right? Vayomer, yehi or, yehi, God said, let there be light, or let there be whatever he created. And it happened from nothing to something. That's how the Jewish religion was created. In one moment, there was no religion, and suddenly we get the whole religion as a package deal with all the details and all of the halachot and all of the tradition. Everything you have to do was given. Torah Shebechtav and Torah Sheba'al Peh was given at Mount Sinai, and there we got a religion. There we became a nation, and that's where it all happened. No gradual development. And the king is shocked. What do you mean? So he says, yeah, well, try to understand. You have to understand who the Jewish people are if you want to understand how the religion was created. The same way a religion is created from something from nothing to something. That's the way the Jewish people, they went from being slaves for 210 years. At 11:59 p.m. they were slaves, and at midnight 12:00 they were now Bnei Yisrael Yotzim B'Yad Ramah, a powerful nation. Well, how does that make sense? And we've seen it over the course of history, over and over and over again, from the Holocaust to founding the State of Israel. The Jewish nation It's a mirror. It's a wonder. It's a phenomenon. It's something we can't really grasp, but this is the reality. Something to nothing. The existence or birth of the Jewish people happened in one moment, when the Jewish people, the nation, the religion just came, handed down the Torah with all the details. Not only the details, every possible new thing that could come up was already in what we were given on Har Sinai. We have all the tools to deal with electricity and artificial inseminations and all the things that could be. Everything is already in what was given on Har Sinai from now till the end of generations. Everything is in there. It's in the Gemara. It's all was given down on Har Sinai. So the king says, okay, I understand this. So basically what you're telling me, now we're reading 88. Amar Akuzari. Mi sheshomea divrechem. Whoever hears you speaking, what you're saying now, Ki Elohim diber im hamonechem, that it's your God, that God spoke to millions of people. V'katav lachem luchot, and he wrote you, we say Hashem, right, wrote the 10 Commandments. Right? Vezulat zeh hadin imo sheyaches lechem dat ha'hagshama. So you're basically saying, what you're saying right now is that the Jewish people, millions of people, heard God speak. And therefore, God, you're saying God is a physical being. You're making God into a material, because who speaks? A person speaks. You're right, you speak, and your voice waves go from me to you. So there's a person speaking. There's a physical, speaking is a physical action. So basically, you believe in a physical God. It's a very heavy accusation. Gam atem en lashimchem. I understand. I believe you that the Mount Sinai happened, that God spoke to you. I don't blame you. I don't doubt that it happened. God spoke to you. And at least I could say, okay, they think God is a person or a physical being because they saw it, and it's obviously the zchut be'ashlachat ha'ikesha v'hagion hasichli. So are you saying basically that to be a Jew is either to say that God is a physical being, either to say that your understanding, your common sense, your level of belief is that you have to basically erase the sechel, erase your intellect, erase your mind. Because if you're saying that God spoke to you, but He's not a physical being, so you're saying, I can't understand it with my mind. So what are you saying? Like we said, Christianity, they have no problem with you saying, get rid of your intellect. God made a woman pregnant without a husband, and they have no problem with that. It doesn't make sense. And God is a person. That God became a person, and that doesn't make sense. How could the Creator be a person, become a person? No problem. You want to be a Christian? Sacrifice your common sense for the greater belief of the religion. So we don't say that. We explained also in the past when we had that question, what are miracles? Are miracles the destruction of the natural world, of the creation that God created? No. Miracles, they're just there to show that God runs the world, that God can change the world if he wants, but they're not there to destroy nature that God created and the laws of nature and the world. We even give one explanation that says that whenever there's a miracle, at the same time, nature continues. So, for example, if Joshua said, Shemesh begivon dov, sun, I want you to stop, at the same time, the sun continued, and there was another sun that stood there. In other words, there's a parallel world of miracles and nature, and the miracles never destroy nature. Like the Jewish people in Egypt, for us, there was light. The Egyptians were in darkness. So it was another reality that was existed, but it doesn't take away the first reality of nature. So it's very important to us to say that we don't want you to say that the Torah is against the intellect and against the common sense and against the what's belief and what truth and what the reality is, right? But this is a very big question. How do you say this? I understand you saw it, but so you're basically saying that forget about the brain, forget about your mind, forget about your intellect. You're saying that you're above the intellect and what makes sense. And he says, this I can't accept. Because the king says, I have a very hard time to really believe that, how could you say God wrote the Ten Commandments? That's what it says in the Torah. V'michtav michtav Elohim hu, right? Etzba Elokim, written with God wrote it. And I can't even come to the understanding, says the king, the belief. And this is what the king has been struggling with through all his search from the dream where God said, I don't want your intentions are wanted, but your actions are not wanted. I can't believe that God speaks to people. How do you want me to believe that? Like the philosopher says, God is way too big to be talking to you. The same way you are not communicating with an ant. It's two different worlds. There's no communication. I'm still struggling with this question, says the king. How am I supposed to believe that God speaks to people, to human beings? And here we are now with this big contradiction between the Torah and the Sechel. And I'm struggling because something that millions of people saw and experienced, I know is true. But how do you answer this? Right? And remember, I know it's true and I know it happened because the millions of people saw it. If a guy like Jesus comes and says that my mother was a virgin and she had a baby, so nobody saw it, nobody can prove it, right? I don't have to believe it. Or if a guy comes, like we said, Muhammad, the crazy Muslim, says an angel came and told me the whole Torah and I wrote it down and this is God speaking to me. You had some kind of hallucination and I have to believe that? One guy that's like in his bathroom got hit on the head by I don't know what, and he has this revelation, I have to believe that? But millions of people who heard God speak, I can't doubt that. It's not even there for. And like we said, the big issue the king has is, how can I come peace with this idea that God speaks with people? It completely contradicts the sechel, the intellect. And if you're saying it speaks to him, so obviously then God has a body, and that's also not acceptable.
But at the same time, it kind of makes sense that if there are four dimensions, why aren't there more dimensions or dimensions of a sort that we don't understand? And that a higher being would be able to communicate with us.
But does it mean that
The Almighty.
but does it mean that the intellect, the secha, what we call the intellect,
Yeah.
your senses,
Are able
that they don't, in other words, it's another level and we can't understand it, we can't accept it, it's something that is a different, like it's like we said, what the king is trying, what the rabbi is trying to explain is that the Torah and the Judaism does not come and say erase your mind, erase your intellect. So how do we explain this question? So the answer the king says is Amar Chaver. The rabbi answers. First of all, let me make it very clear. Chalila lael min hasheker u'ma she'asechel marchik oto v'yasimeu sheker. First of all, us Jews, we do not accept the idea of erasing your intellect or your common sense. It's not true. There is nothing in our faith that says, be an idiot. Shut off your brain. Don't think. There is nothing in other religions. Yes, in Christianity, they did not allow the masses to read, to learn to read, or to. But in Judaism, it's always been everybody's encouraged to come into the lab of the rabbis where they brought down the Gemara and all of the. You come and be part of the discussion. See how things came down, how things developed. Be part of the discussion. Think for yourself. What would you say? Also, before you learn Gemara, read what the rabbis say. Before you read the answers, and give your question. Of course, with being humble. But what would you say here? What do you think? What's the answer? What's the right way? Be part. Be active in the learning and in the process. We're not looking for people to be illiterates and to just have blind faith in the rabbis and not be involved and not understand how we reach the solutions, the conclusions. Right? The sechel is part of the Torah. The same way we don't want to get rid of the emotions. We don't want to get rid of imagination. All these things are part, and therefore the Torah does not want to oppress any of the powers that we have in us, whether it's the senses, what we said, imagination and emotions. Everything has a place and everything needs to be used. So therefore, how do we understand this big question? And therefore, what's the answer? Utchilat. Now, because of your question, says the rabbi, you're asking a very good question. Because your question is so important, and really you're asking a question it's a good question. That's why, because God knew that people could make this mistake. So what is the first thing? Utchilat aseret advarim. What was the first thing that God said in the Torah when He spoke to us? So God is speaking to us now. And what is He telling us? Shena'amin be'Elohim. The first one is believe in God. Ve'asheni azhara me'avot Elohim acherim. And the second one was, do not serve other gods and do not make any statues. Don't even make a statue. Don't even make a picture. You can't believe in God and another God. Yes.
How does this apply to statues of human beings? Is also
You're not allowed to. You have to know the laws.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to make a statue of a person.
Yeah.
There's laws.
Like in North Korea, the large.
Yes, a full statue of a human being you're not allowed to make.
Yeah.
You can make a half statue. But that's why so people that do it, they have to leave something out, like you leave the nose off, or I don't know, something like, there's like laws on understanding how to do this. But the second commandment, right after God said believe in God, what did he say? Do not make God into a materialistic, right, being. We are not allowed to make God into a being, into a physical being, or into a materialistic concept. אוקיי, ואיך לא נרממהו מהגשמות, ואנחנו אומרים קצת מביותיו מהגשמות. כנפש המדברת שהיא האדם באמת. אשר ידבר עמנו ממשה וישכיל וינהג איננו לשונו ולא ליבו ולא מוחו, הרי אלה גם כלים משה. ומשה נפש מדברת, מכרת, אינה גשם ואינה נגבלת במקום, ולא יצא ממנה מקום, לא תצא כלל, so we'll explain. So basically, the third, so we said, the first rule is, we're not against the intellect. Well, I don't understand it. We'll get there. Second thing is, we don't allow in Judaism to turn God into anything physical. The third rule is that we accept the same way a person, same way a human being, you have a hard time understanding how God could speak to us. But the same way a human being, who are you truly as a person? You are your soul. You are your what we call the nefesh. You're also revealed in a body. But what you are, right, is your soul. You are your soul. The same way you have a soul and you reveal yourself in a physical way. So the same way God, who is obviously something non-tangible, can choose to reveal himself in a physical way, like you were saying, closer to what you were saying, in a new dimension of understanding. But it does not take away from that the soul is a spiritual thing. It reveals itself in a physical way, but it does not take away from it being a spiritual being. Right? And that's why God obviously can choose, and that's why the bracha we make when we go to the bathroom, we make a blessing. God creates, does this wonder. And what's the wonder? Says the Rama. Kosher davar ruchani bagashmi. How is it that the soul stays in the body? Because it says that God blew life into Vayipach be'apav nishmat chaim. God blew life into Adam. But we have all these holes. So how does the soul not leave? You blow a balloon. If there's a hole, the spirit leaves. How does the soul stay in the body? Right? And therefore, you see that this is the reality. This is the reality of the world. And so the king, who it's really hard for him to accept this, how could you say God's a physical thing? Is reveals in a physical way. But he says, what do you mean? That's our whole reality. The whole reality that we're in is a soul that is revealed in a body. And therefore God can choose to reveal himself how he wants. Yeah.
Let's say, for example, like in the case of Havel and Cain, when when Cain doesn't know where the soul come out, he just slit his throat and then the soul came out. Can we say that if a person like got wounded, some of the soul coming out of your body?
It's a good question. No, not some of the soul. It either comes out or doesn't come out. There's only two situations. Either the soul leaves you or the soul is in you, is with you. That's why somebody who, it's very complicated, somebody who is very wounded and unconscious and sick, when is he dead, when is he not? Right? Or when is it the brain dead? Or these are rabbis have to make, but generally, anyone who's alive, as long as your soul is in you, you're alive.
When we say alive, are we talking about the brain or the heart?
That's the question. That's the question. That's already very, very complex halachic questions. When is the person considered dead? I think the heart is the, as long as the heart is pumping and the person's alive.
So it means that I don't understand, like, the if the soul is still there, or
The soul is still there as long as the heart is pumping.
but if the heart is not pumping and the brain is alive, it
That
means,
can't be. I don't think it can be.
what's the term brain then?
It's a good question. We have to look into that. It's a very good question. I don't know. But like I said, those situations that are very in between, like the fine line.
Yeah.
That's why you need to have rabbis that can make that decision, and they have the power to say, okay, you can, this person's not alive, but it's very complex. This whole idea of mercy killing is murder in Judaism, where and a lot of times the person says, I want to die, and why do they want to die? Because either they feel like they're a burden on their family, and a lot of this is it's not simple. And that's why I'm saying the Torah is very, very guided by God, and the laws are very complex, and people that know about these issues. So basically, like we said, the king has a difficulty with accepting that God can reveal himself in a physical way, because physical seems like a very low thing, a materialistic way, or speak, like we said. So the rabbi says, but what are you talking about? Do you think the creator of the world is less than the soul? The soul is revealed in the body. So is there a problem for God to reveal in a physical way? And by the way, what makes something idol worshipping? The golden calf, we're going to get there next, but or Nadav and Avihu, they went in golden calf, not allowed. But then you have the kruvim, the tabernacle, and it's allowed because God says that this is okay and this is not, right? So what makes something physical into idol worshipping is that God says you can't, or God says you can. The right,
Okay.
like the sons of Aaron went into the holiest of holies. God didn't command them, so they were killed. It was something that it was wrong.
Yeah.
So he says, why do you have such a hard time on accepting that? The soul is revealed in the body, and God can choose to reveal himself in a physical way. Right? And like we said, a person is not really a body. A person is not a body and is not a soul, but he's a soul. That's who we truly are. You're not. It's not that you take all of your limbs together and that's it. This is who you are. A person is his soul. And that's why the soul continues with you, and the soul. So the question is, why? What do we care if we say that God is a physical being? Of course we care, because then you're making God very, very small. You're contracting God into something very, very small. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu, when he speaks to us, was his mouth speaking to us? No, it was his soul speaking to us. Right? His soul is what speaks. So that's the way he explains it. Therefore, and that was the answer that he gave. So, and this is something the king says, Omnam hadin aleinu shelo nidche ma shekibalnu min ha'mamad. And the fact is, we can't deny the experience that we had. ונאמר שאין אנו יודעים איך נגשם העניין עד ששב דיבור וקרא את אוזנינו. And we really don't know how it happened that God spoke. We can't really explain. We don't know how did it become physical, and we heard voices. We heard speech. ולא מה שברא לו יתברך ממה שלא היה נמצא, ולא מה שהעביר לו מן הנמצאים, כי לא לא יחסר לו יכולת כאשר ברא שמיים והכוכבים ברצונו בלבד. So he says, number one, the rabbi says to the king, number one, the experience of Har Sinai happened. It happened. God spoke to us through the fire. Number two, God is not a physical being. In no way whatsoever, God is not physical. And you're saying that those two things contradict. You're saying it can't be he spoke to you and at the same time he's not physical. And I'm saying to you that they don't contradict because we don't know how it happened. How did God speak? We don't know how the voices came. How did he use the how do you say the wave, the air wavelengths for the sound to come to us? We don't know. We don't know exactly how God did it. That it became, the spiritual became physical. The same way we don't know how the soul functions in the body. We don't know. Like we said, God blew life into us and we're like a balloon, but it stays inside and doesn't blow out. We have all these holes. It should leave, but it stays in there, and that's the miracle. Right? And it all exists. And from that miracle of the soul that we have in us, we could learn this understanding of the fact that the creator of the world, who is infinite and lo mugbal and non how do you say mugbal, non restricted to this world, he has an effect on the world. Ki lo yechsar lo yecholet. God has many ways, many tools that he can use. Kasher barat hashamayim v'kochavim birtzono bilvad. The same way he created the stars and he created the heavens. V'ratzah yitbarach v'niksham al hashiur asher chafetz v'nichrat bahem ktav b'asat hadvarim. So if you're asking these questions, why are you only asking questions on the Ten Commandments? Why don't you ask the question on the creation of the world? How did God, who is completely spiritual, create a physical world? Right? So if he created a physical world, the spiritual God created a physical world, then obviously he can also create the Ten Commandments. And he can also create like we said, he can write it on the what do they call the Ten Commandments? What's it called? The tablets? The tablets. So all the questions that we have about these miracles and how did God speak to us, it all brings us back to the miracle of all miracles, creation of the world. Right? The philosophers solved the problem easily. What did they say? God never created the world. The world always existed. So they don't have a question. The physical, the materialism, everything material was always here. Everything always existed. And therefore they don't have to question this question that we're saying. And we're saying if God, who's physical, spiritual, created this physical world and can reveal in the physical, the same way a human being who is a physical being but has a soul and his soul is revealed within him, and therefore, right? And therefore, for us, we're not looking for the easy way out. We're saying the spiritual is revealed in the physical. Kasher nomar ki kara et hayam, the same way we say that God split the sea, v'samau lechomot, and created in the sea, created walls. Omdot miyamin ha'am v'salam, there was walls to the left and to the right of you when you walked through the the ocean coming out of Egypt. And there was mesilot, mesudot, dechavot. There was 12 pathways that were very organized and wide and neat. Ve'aretz yeshara yelchuba, and the land was completely like a road, a paved road, and they had no delay and they had no difficulty. V'chen hakriya v'binyan v'tikun מיוחס אליו יתברך. לא נצטרך בו אל כלי ולא אל סיבות אמצעיות כאשר יצטרך בפועל הברואים, כי המים עמדו במרום הצטרו בחפצו. כן הצטער האוויר והמגע אל אוזן הנביא בצורה אותיות, שהם פירות על עניינים שהוא חפץ להשמיעם אל הנביא או אל ההמון. A human being, human beings, you want to build a wall in a tunnel in the ocean. What do you need? So you need now bricks and metal and machines and tools, and right? But God doesn't need that. When God wants to make a tunnel in the ocean, 12 tunnels that are with a paved road, he just makes it happen because he said, let it happen. He doesn't need all the like, how do we have rain? We have the clouds, and the clouds bring rain. But God could bring rain without clouds. And God could make the tunnels and build these tunnels in the ocean without any, how do you say, emtsaim, without any tools, without any means. Okay? If we say that God created the world with means, okay, then how did he create the means, right? Like, if God used tractors and trucks and all these things, well, how did he create those? In other words, God is spiritual and he has an effect on the physical world. And therefore, everything is written in the Torah in physical terms. Dibra Torah kilshon bnei Adam. The Torah was written in the language of man. Right? It says all kinds of things. God sat, God said, God thought, God, was upset. It doesn't mean that God's physical. Right? So this is a very big question that we're answering here. Let's just finish this. Okay? Yes.
Does all these verbs like ve'ashev, ve'ichas, and all this, does it really say that is physical, or does it say that maybe those things are godly in origin?
No, it's all godly in origin. That's why it's very important. If you could learn the first chapter of Moreh Nevuchim, it's a whole dictionary to understanding everything when it says that God sat and God's what does it mean that when all the physical things that it says about God, how it's not. Look up the Moreh Nevuchim. First chapter is that's not the hard stuff. It's just like a dictionary for understanding this concept of the physical things that we say about God. And the king says, Zot atana maspeket. I accept. Thank you. Very good answer. Now I understand. It's very deep, but I understand. And the rabbi says, I just want to add one thing. I'm not trying to tell you that it happened in this way, how God spoke. I don't know. I can tell you God doesn't need a mouth to speak. God doesn't need to use the voice waves for sound to come to us and us to hear something. Don't try to think I'm trying to say that. Maybe it's deeper than even the way I told you. Ach, העולה מזה, האמנת מי שראה המעמדות האלה, כי העניין ההוא מאת הבורא בלי מיצוע. What we experienced on Mount Sinai was something non-questionable. פני שהם דומות לבריאה ראשונה, היצירה הראשונה. It was like the creation of the world because it was something new. Same way when the God created the world, there was completely something new created that didn't exist before. On Mount Sinai, there was a creation that took place. We all became new people. We were all created. We all became created right there, right then. And it was, in other words, everything was open. That there could be things happening in a different way because this is the creation. So, like I said, it doesn't have to be happen as I told you. Maybe there's a deeper thing. So basically, the receiving of the Torah was the second creation of the world, right? And God said, if you receive the Torah, great. Otherwise, I return the world to chaos. And it's a secret. And therefore, the same way the creation of the world was a certain secret, where it's, going from one reality to another reality. And that's called Maaseh Bereshit. And that's the secret of how does the body come into the soul? How does the creator of the world reveal himself in the physical? This is something that's very, very deep. But we're talking about something that is the most certain. When we received the Torah, it was certain on every level. We saw it with our eyes, we heard it, all of our senses were involved, and we experienced it firsthand with no right? We're talking about certainty. We're not saying there isn't doubts in the world, but this was the most certain thing that ever happened. And faith is something that is above your intellect and it's above any level of existence. Okay? And therefore it was something we saw. And so he says, so then, okay, and that's how we had to pass it on to our children and our children's children. We saw something. We actually came in contact with the creator of the world. And you'll say, okay, well, I didn't. Only my fathers did. My great-great-grandparents did. He says, yeah, but your great-grandparents, they passed it on. And the Torah says, be very careful not to forget what you saw and pass it on. That day that you stood before God on the Mount of Chorev. Right? So therefore, we're not saying that the Torah is not intellectual, is not sechel. We're not saying that. But the source of all knowledge, the source of the knowledge and of everything we got is not sechel. We use our sechel to explain it. This is very important. But it doesn't start from the sechel. And it's very important to know when you're learning Torah, I'll read to you something here from Rav Zuckerman. He says a beautiful thing. He says that when you're learning Torah, okay, you're having a direct contact with God. And you have to experience that. And same thing when you're learning Torah. When you're learning Gemara, you want Hashem to teach you. If you're learning Torah and you're trying to only understand it with your sechel, okay? So you're learning human wisdom. That's it. What we're working with our brain and our intellect and trying to understand the Gemara or the Torah, whatever it is, okay? We don't want to just understand what the Gemara says. We want to prepare ourselves through the effort, through the hard work, through the Dibalta Bam, what the Torah said, speak it, learn it, that Hashem should guide me to understand it in the right way, as to get like a revelation from above. That's what you want when you're learning Torah, to have a revelation. That's the ultimate. It's like we said, you're learning Torah, so like we said, the person in the womb studied the whole Torah and then he forgot. The angel came and made you forget. When you're studying Torah, it's like the starter in the car. You want it to turn on your soul. Turn on that connection to God, that experience, the revelation of God. Like Rav Tzikman used to say, two people are sitting there and they're talking Torah and you don't understand the answer and I don't understand the answer. And suddenly I say the answer. I didn't say the answer. And you didn't say the answer. It's the Shekhinah between us came down. And that's what we want to do. We want to arouse this Har Sinai, this direct connection with God. That's what we want to experience. So the king says, okay, I accept it. But now my question is, how do you explain that the Jewish people did the golden calf? The sin of the golden calf. Next week, that's what we will discuss. Hazak